Very good. Thank you. Great. There's this very sort of show-tune microphone. So I think probably about here. Can you hear me? I feel like I should burst into a rendition of My Baby Just Cares for Me or something. It's very funny. Like a diva microphone. If I get a bit loud or squeaky, will you just let me know? I need to stand the right distance from it. So, yes, as Louise mentioned, I'm Sarah Prag, and I am here because I'm a digital person. I've been developing digital services for frighteningly 15 years now. So originally as part of the original eBay team, and then at the BBC for quite a long time, and then most relevantly for 2 years as part of the government digital service, which is part of the Cabinet Office, and amongst many other things, it's responsible for the GovUK website, which Louise just mentioned, and I was very involved with the early stages of GovUK and its launch. So I'll be talking a little bit about that later on. But since January, when I left the government digital service, having done my 2 years, I'm now working freelance, and I'm working with local authorities and organisations like this to really try and kind of get to the bottom of what are some of the challenges and opportunities for digital in local government, and how might I help to make some of that kind of a bit easier. So that's why I'm here today. And so Louise and Abby asked me if I'd just sort of set the scene for the day, and then we're going to hear from various experts and practitioners later on. So I'm really here to answer this question: why are we here today? So we're really here to make sure that as many people and businesses as possible can benefit from using your digital services, but also from using the internet more widely. And that's because online service, so for councils, online self-service is the most cost-effective way to deliver most of the services and information that you want to get out there. So this is from the Government Digital Efficiency Report. We know that online's 20 times cheaper than contact on the phone, 30 times cheaper than the post, and 50 times cheaper than dealing with people face-to-face. So there's a kind of quite a stark kind of benefit here for councils, which is that the more of your customers are able to self-serve online confidently, the better it is for you. But also more broadly than that, citizens and businesses who can use and benefit from the internet are just generally more prosperous. So there's kind of a social justice and well-being benefit, but also as great for you if your citizens and local businesses are able to get online to save money or to make money if they're a business, to find jobs, which is a really important thing that the internet enables, to become less isolated. So I think when Anna later on speaks to us from the Tinder Foundation, she can speak to this about the social benefits of people being connected and being online, and the health and well-being benefits as well. So yes, in the short term it might be a good tool to help the councils, help people self-serve, and that brings immediate savings, but actually there are broader, longer-term benefits here that hopefully we can also recognise as well. So during the course of the day, we're going to kind of touch on this in a couple of ways. So I'm here to set the scene, so answer some of these questions here. What does it mean to be digitally excluded? And what is the challenge, but also what's the opportunity? And then we're going to sort of dive into three key sort of areas of activity that anyone in this room can probably get involved with to help people to become digitally included. So the first is to make your digital services so good that people choose to use them. And that's the bit that I'm going to talk about in a moment. And then later on we're going to hear from Richard from the Government Digital Service and the assisted digital team there. And he's going to talk to us a bit about how councils and how service providers generally can assist people who can't use the digital services by themselves and perhaps never will. So that's the second area we're going to look at. And then Anna from the Tinder Foundation is going to talk to us later about how to help people get online and develop their skills, so how can you actually encourage those that aren't yet online or aren't yet confident to gain that confidence and gain that access. So those are the three sort of areas of things that can. We're also going to hear from two local authorities about what they're doing right now. So that's Darren from North Lincolnshire and Annabelle from Bradford. And then most importantly as all, as Louise has already alluded to, there's going to be sessions throughout the day about how you can make a difference. And so various breakout sessions and workshops where we're going to sort of work through different activities and really start to tease out what some of the possibilities are. So that's kind of the most important bit, really. So in terms of sort of what do we mean by digital inclusion and so on, this is a very excellent document that was published by the Government Digital Service on behalf of central government and lots of different partners actually back in April. And it's available online. If you Google Government Digital Inclusion Strategy, you will find it on GovUK. And there's loads of detail in there about with a lot of data and a lot about who's involved and the partnerships across the private and public sector and government. So I'd really encourage you, if you're interested, to go and have a look at that. And I'm just really picking out a few headlines to kind of set the scene here today. But everything I'm talking about initially is sort of taken from this document. So if you want the background, I'd suggest you go and have a look at that. And so in terms of sort of based on that, well, what do we mean by digital exclusion? Well, we really mean that people or businesses who lack the basic digital skills and capability needed to benefit from the internet. And in terms of what we mean by basic digital skills, you probably won't be able to read this at the back, but this is what's published by Go On UK, who I'll mention again later. They're a nationwide charity, national charity, that are a real hub for this activity and for gathering and sharing best practice. And they've come up with this definition of basic online skills. I thought it was worth sharing because basic online skills doesn't just mean you can go on the internet and do a thing. They define it as this, which is that you should be, someone who's got basic online skills probably should be able to send and receive emails, use a search engine, browse the internet, just going to move the cursor, and then fill out an online application form. So maybe apply for a job, or make a booking, or access a government service, or register on a social media website. So those are the things that they should be able to do. But then importantly, they also need to kind of stay safe while they're doing those things. So Go On UK also suggests that there are some things that will tell us whether someone's got the basic level of online safety awareness. So can they identify and delete spam? Are they able to evaluate which sites they can trust? And can they set privacy settings appropriately? So actually, when we talk about people having basic online skills and therefore being digitally included, it means they can do all of these things. So I think it's just important to bear that in mind. It's not just about being able to go online. It's about being able to go online and do all these things and do them safely. And I think quite shockingly, perhaps, 21% of the population in the UK don't have those skills yet. They are the digitally excluded. So that's 1 in 5 people in the UK population who can't yet do those things confidently and safely that I just talked about. Perhaps less immediately relevant for today, because I think we are mainly going to focus on, or take questions at the end if that's okay. We're going to mainly focus on citizens, but also, and there's lots about this in the digital inclusion strategy, about a third of small and medium businesses don't have a website yet. So think of all, they're missing out on all of that potential trade and being able to support their customers and follow up on needs and all of that. And also, I think even more shockingly, 72% of the voluntary community and social enterprise sector lack the skills to transact online. So this is, these are quite big numbers, really, who don't have those basic online skills and the confidence to go and use the internet safely. And really helpfully, the guys who put together the digital inclusion strategy have kind of come up with a scale that helps us to work out where people are on a bit of a spectrum. And I've just pulled out the scale here, and we'll look at it as a picture in a moment. But these are the kind of categories that are now being suggested to sort of assess people against. So there are people who never have and never will go online or be digitally sort of enabled. There are people who have been online, but for some reason they're not anymore. There are people who are willing to give it a go, but they're not able to currently, either for technical reasons or to do with confidence or whatever it might be, and we'll talk about some of the barriers in a minute. Then there are those that are online, but they're pretty reluctant and they're probably not getting the most out of it. There are those that are learning the ropes, so they're kind of keen, but they're not quite there yet. And there are those that are going on and doing task-specific activities. So I think they might be going and using Facebook, or they might even be doing online banking, but they only do it within the constraints of what their bank has set up for them, and they don't use the internet more widely. So they might be online doing 1 or 2 things, but they don't have that range of basic digital skills that we just looked at. And then there are the top 3. There's a lot who do have those basic digital skills, and beyond that there are people who are confident, and then there are the experts. So that's the scale. And this is a great diagram that I think Richard will show us again later when he's talking, but this is lifted from the digital inclusion strategy, and it shows us that there's that scale along the bottom, and I knew you wouldn't be able to read it, which is why I pulled them out earlier. So with the never have, never wills on the left and the experts on the right. And this shows us quite dramatically, there's our 21% who are not yet digitally included, if you like. So the red block is the 14% who either never have, never will, or were online and aren't anymore, or are willing but unable. And then we've got our 7%. So the guys on the left, the red ones, those are probably particularly right for the sort of activities that Rich is going to talk to us about later. So they can't or won't go online. There's the 7%, the yellow lot, who are having a go, but they don't yet have that full suite of basic digital skills that we've been talking about. And then there's the 79% who do have the basic skills. So we're talking about those guys on the left in the red and orange, and how we can help them to become digitally included, digitally capable, and where they can't or won't, how we can assist them. So there's an ambition that's now been set at a national level by central government and partners, including actually in collaboration with local government, to really make it a mission to kind of help as many people as possible to move from those red and yellow sections on the left across to have basic digital skills to be able to benefit from the internet. And actually they've set some targets around this, and there's now an ambition to reduce the number of people who are digitally excluded by 25% in the next 2 years. So if that's achieved, that will be almost 3 million people in April 2016 who will be online and able to engage with all of the stuff and benefit from it, who aren't currently there. So that would be an amazing achievement. And beyond that, they're actually saying, well, let's keep at it. Let's reduce it by a further 25% every 2 years, so that by 2020, less than 10% are left excluded, and that's probably because there are going to be some people who will never be able to use the internet unassisted, and that's why we need the assisted digital provision that we're just going to talk to us about later. So the ambition is to sort of get everyone who can and will to be able to do this stuff confidently and by themselves. And in terms of sort of, well, who are these excluded people that we talk about? Well, there's a lot of really rich data in the strategy. And so I didn't want to bombard you with percentages, but generally speaking, the people who are digitally excluded are more likely to be living in social housing, or on low wages or unemployed, or registered with disabilities, or offenders or ex-offenders. Also, yes, many of them, in fact half of them, are over 65, so there are people, there are a lot of pensioners out there who don't yet have these skills or this confidence. But actually, it's not just about pensioners, because there are quite a few between 55 and 65, and also there are young people who are digitally excluded. 6% of this group are between 15 and 24, which is perhaps quite surprising. And unsurprisingly, though, I think 2/3 of them are unemployed. So there's a real correlation between, as we've mentioned already, sort of having access and confidence online and being able to sort of find work and prosper. And in terms of what's stopping these people from benefiting from the internet, the guys behind the digital inclusion strategy and their partners have identified sort of 4 main areas, and Anna from the Tinder Foundation is going to speak to us about this in more detail later, but broadly speaking, there are challenges around access, around skills, around motivation, and around trust. And actually one of the things I found most surprising when I started to look into this is that it's easy to assume that access is going to be one of the biggest barriers. So not having an internet connection, if you're perhaps moving around a lot or don't have a fixed address, how are you going to have a contract with a broadband provider or a mobile provider? So maybe it's to do with that, or maybe it's to do with not being able to afford the kit, the laptops and the smartphones and all the rest of it. And that is a factor for some people, but actually a much bigger factor is motivation. So actually 62% of the people who are in this group of digitally excluded, when they're asked why they're not online, they give the answer, oh, well, I'm not really interested. I don't really think it's for me. I don't really know why should I? And so I think that's actually really kind of important thing to remember, is that it's not just about kit, it's not about getting wires and boxes into people's homes. It's also about convincing them that it's a thing that will benefit them and that they will enjoy, and that's what Anna hopefully be able to share some thoughts about that with us later. And then there's a lot about skills as well, so actually helping people to become more confident, and again, we'll hear more about that later. So these are the 4 main areas of barriers to bear in mind when we're thinking about how we can help people to overcome these. And in terms of what's being done nationally, again, there's loads of this in the strategy, and this is really my take on it, my little summary, is that I think there's a lot of kind of the national strategy is a lot around collaboration and coordination. So there's a real commitment now within government to get departments sharing kind of approaches more and kind of collaborating on stuff, but also for central government to be collaborating more with local government, with partners in the private sector. So there's Lloyds Bank, for example, and EE and ASDA have all got initiatives that are to help people, set up in ASDA cafes. You can get digital skills sessions, and EE are doing kind of techie tea parties where they're inviting people in to learn about this stuff. So there's a lot going on in the private sector. And in the third sector, so the Tinder Foundation, who we'll hear from later, a major sort of force in this area. So there's a lot of collaboration and coordination going on now, which is really good news. And some setting of some standards and shared language and shared terminology, and these shared targets, and a commitment to measure collectively how we all do to kind of achieve these targets. So that's happening from the centre. But mainly it's kind of going to be about sharing best practice, because a lot of the really kind of impactful things that are going to go on are going to be local and specific. And I think that's something that really struck me when I looked into this, particularly having worked in central government and said, here is GovUK, everybody sort of use it. This is very different. This is about everybody's reasons for being digitally excluded are different, and it's about really understanding in your particular area, in your particular sector, how can people best be helped. And then what's happening centrally is lots of initiatives to help you to really amplify that, to share what's worked and what hasn't, to benefit from other people's experience. And Go On UK, who I mentioned earlier, they are very much central to that process. So they're a charity that has partnerships with lots of people involved in this, and created digitalskills.com, which is now has been identified as sort of the place that everybody's going to share resources, and it's the place to go if you're looking for resources and want to share things. So there's this kind of real momentum now. There's been lots of great stuff happening, as the strategy acknowledges, over many years, but now it's all about sort of trying to make it greater than the sum of its parts, and how can people collaborate and work together. In terms of, that's all well and good, that there's a national strategy and national charities doing things, but what can you do really in the room today? So as I mentioned earlier, when we were thinking about this day, we thought, well, there's really three main things to think about probably as we're getting started with this. The first is making digital services so good that people actually choose to use them, rather than pick up the phone to your call centre or fill in a form online. So I'm going to talk in a minute about how you might be able to do some of that. And as I said, assist people who can't use the digital services by themselves, and that's what Rich is going to talk to us about later. And then help people to get online and develop their skills, and that's what Anna's going to talk to us about. So those are the three sort of strands we're going to keep picking up. But before we get into all of that, the first thing you've got to do is introduce yourself to the people on your tables. So I think we've got 10 minutes for this, or 5-10 minutes. So really it's just introduce yourselves to people on the table, tell them who you are, where you come from, and then it'd be great if you could just share one thing that you think that the place you come from, your council or authority, is already doing that is basically in the spirit of this. Because as hopefully I've just made clear, this is about sort of a range of activities and is about helping people to use digital services. So yeah, share if you can a thought on something that's already happening. Yeah. Opportunities later on this morning and this afternoon in your groups to really find out more about each other and what you're up to and so on. So I'm just going to take us through now the first of the kind of main areas of activity we're going to talk about today, which is making digital services so good that people actually choose to use them as opposed to other channels. So I guess this is about channel shift and about how you can achieve that. And really I think the things that I'm going to focus on are how to make sure that your digital services and your websites are user-centred. I'll explain what that means in a moment. Clearly written and accessible. So those are the three main things. And in doing that, I'm going to draw on the experience I had at the Government Digital Service, the work that I did on GovUK, but which continues now on GovUK and beyond that. And so just very briefly, for those that don't already know, this is a sort of 2-minute guide to Government Digital Service and where it came from and why it exists. So this is Martha Lane Fox, Baroness Lane Fox of Soho, I think is technically the title now. And back in 2010, Francis Maud, Minister of the Cabinet Office, wrote to Martha and said, Martha, if you were going to deliver government services digitally in the same way that you as an entrepreneur have delivered lastminute.com and other success stories, how would you do it? So Martha went away and she talked to some other smart people and they came up with a set of recommendations to the Cabinet Office. And first of those was sort of set up a group of people who can make this happen, which is the Government Digital Service. And then initially, in the first year or two, these were then the three sort of main challenges. So the first one was fixed publishing. So take the hundreds of different, expensive to run, confusing government websites and turn them into one single website for central government. The next challenge was fixed transactions. So, okay, fixed publishing gets you information sorted, but actually, what about the 675, I think it is? Government transactions, central government transactions. So where people are exchanging information or money or licenses or whatever it might be with government, where a transaction is actually taking place. Make those as good as the commercial transactions that people do. It should be as easy and enjoyable to pay your tax as it is to buy something on Amazon or that equivalent. Not sure if we're there yet. Not sure if we're there yet, but that's the story. Make it so good people choose to use it, even to pay their tax. And then the third one, which we won't touch on much today, was about going wholesale. And what she meant by that is actually you can't do it all yourselves. The ambition should be to make government data available and open so that other people can build services on top of it. So government isn't having to do it all itself, and that the commercial sector and entrepreneurs are able to build things on top of government data. So that's beginning to happen now. But the first two were the biggies. And GovUK was the response to that first challenge, fixed publishing. So back in October 2012, we launched GovUK, which looks something like this. And this is the top half of the homepage, and this is the part of GovUK that replaced Direct as Business Link, and it's really about services and information for citizens and businesses as they go about their daily lives. And then below the black line is the bottom half of the page, which represents the other large and growing part of GovUK, which is all of the information from government departments and agencies about what they're up to and their policies and their consultations and all of that stuff. And so all of the ministerial departments are on there, and many of the government agencies are now on there, and there's still some transitioning as we speak, but that's the other part of GovUK. So that was about fixing publishing. And then also, really exciting now, after sort of WK, comes the process of transforming transactions. And so the Government Digital Service is working with government departments on 25 services that have been picked out to be the exemplar services. So it's the Government Digital Service in partnership with people in departments working to make tax as easy and straightforward as Amazon, or making it as painless as possible for you to apply for lasting power of attorney, or to register to vote, which actually went live the day before yesterday. I'm very proud of because I was involved with that one. So there's a whole programme of transformation underway, and there's loads of information about it online. This is the digital transformation blog, which is part of the Government Digital Service. So if you're interested in that more transforming services side of what GDS do, I definitely recommend going and have a look at that. Also at the service design manual, there's links to all of these things, by the way, at the end of the presentation, which will be put up online. But the service design manual is packed full of lots of information about how GDS and departments are going about transforming digital services, including things about assisted digital and some of the things we'll hear about later. So that's all available online. But I'm mainly going to speak to you now about more the kind of content and information side of things, and less about the transactional services. But the principles that I'm about to run through apply to both. And so in various breaks, I'm happy to talk about the more transactional stuff, but it's also all available here online if you want to go and read out more about it. So, in terms of both GovUK, the website, and those transactions that are increasingly being plugged into it, this was really kind of at the core of what GDS are trying to do, is to make things simpler, clearer, and faster. And we felt there was a need for that. It's things like this. So, apologies, this is actually really difficult to see on the screen, but it's a selection of some of the pages you would have had to have trawled through on DirectGov if you were trying to find out about lasting power of attorney. And this is what it turned into on GovUK. It's a single guide with 10 parts. This is what you would have come across on DirectGov if you wanted to find out when the next bank holiday was, which is not terrible. The information is there. It's a table. You can find out when the next bank holiday is on this page without scrolling or clicking. But this is what it looks like on GovUK. Because actually what most people want to find out is when is the next bank holiday. They don't really need to know when Easter Monday will be the year after next. It's mainly about when's the next bank holiday. So that's up there, front and centre, as is a nice handy link so you can add all of the bank holidays to your calendar with one click. And then below there is a table then for everything for the next few years if you need it, but the majority aren't looking for that, they're looking for the next bank holiday. So this page has been optimised around that need. And it was all about user needs. So GovUK has been a success. I think it had 500 million visitors by last Christmas, so that's 6 months out of date now, and it's won various awards, and it's all fabulous. But actually, at the end of the day, it's all down to understanding user needs. And this is something that anybody can do in any organisation, regardless of what technology you've got or how big your team is. We were very lucky at GDS, at the Government Digital Service. We were able to hire a great team and build stuff from scratch, and it was all very lovely. But actually, these principles, particularly this one about understanding user need, you can apply regardless. So every local authority can do the stuff that I'm about to talk about. And this genuinely was on the window actually in our office. Someone stuck it up there to remind us every day that we were only there to help those people down on the street to live their lives and do the stuff they needed to do, and to make their interaction with government as quick and painless as possible. And so we made it up the first principle. Now this is, again, pretty hard to read, but there are design principles online for GovUK. And this was the first one of them. And it says start with needs, and then it caveats back by saying user needs, not government needs. And that was probably the single biggest sort of flip in thinking that we had to help everybody go through. It's about user needs. And we said the design process must start with identifying and thinking about real user needs. We should design around those, not around the way the official process is at the moment. We must understand those needs thoroughly, interrogating data, not just making assumptions. And we should remember that what users ask for is not always what they need. It mentioned data in that description, that we should interrogate data. And this is really, I think, such a sort of powerful tool that everybody has, again, regardless of what technology you have. There will be data from your current website about what people are and are not using and where they're clicking and how they're moving between pages and what the popular information is. There will also probably be information about where they're exiting your site and where they've come from, which is all really valuable for working out sort of what they were looking for and whether they found it or not. There's also data available for free or for a small fee from Google and other online tools that helps you understand what people are searching for, what language are they using, what sort of demand is there for different types of activity, different types of services that you offer. Really, really powerfully, there's data from your call centre and other channels. I think there's an example from the student loans company who realised that one of the main things that their call centre were dealing with at great cost was people ringing up because they couldn't remember their login and password for the online service. And it was a really difficult and obscure user journey to reset your password. And so they thought, well, actually, if we fix that, the call centre volume will go down. And they did, and it really went down, and they saved a lot of money. So that was just through kind of monitoring what actually are the frequent calls that come into the call centre, and how can you maybe divert some of that by actually making the digital option more straightforward. And then you can get data direct from your customers. So this is sort of user research type stuff, but it needn't be expensive. I'm doing some work at the moment with Bristol City Council on complaints, which is jolly. And the user experience team just went out and they spoke to 10 people on College Green, which is the bit of grass outside the council house. And just from that got some sort of insight. And okay, you can't base all the decisions on just what 10 people say, but it really brings to life. And it's still better than not having talked to any of your customers. So, getting out there with a laptop or a bit of paper and asking people, even about what language, it turns out the word complain didn't really feature in the way they were thinking about contacting the council. So we're now thinking more about feedback. So actually you can learn a lot from talking to people. Get out there and talk to them. So once we'd used data to understand what the needs of our users were, what the needs of our customers were, and where the demand was, we decided to turn that into user stories. And user stories is something that comes from software development. So agile software development, which happens to be the method we were using, has this concept of a user story, which really just helps you to kind of articulate who's the audience for this, and what's the action that they're trying to undertake, and why do they want to do it. So in software development, we express it like this. We say, well, as a person, I want to do a thing so that I can achieve the thing. For example, as a person with a new job, I want to check my holiday entitlement so that I can plan my holidays. And actually, people do use the term holiday entitlement, which we were quite surprised by. We used Google Trends to see, do people put in holiday entitlement or holiday or annual leave or leave allowance, like what phrase do they use? And the answer is the majority do use holiday entitlement. Our page on WK was titled Holiday Entitlement, and it really just steps people through in really obvious parts, sort of what holiday pay the basics, and calculate your leave entitlement and booking time off. And so it's just all there in one place. You can step through it. And actually, if you did, for example, Google booking time off, you would land on, you probably can't see it, but part 4 on there is booking time off. And those are all those pages are indexed so that you can find them in Google. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. So once we'd identified the user need using data, and turned that into user stories that really focused us on who's this for and what do they need to achieve, then we could design content. And we deliberately use the term design. We have content designers, they have content designers at the Government Digital Service, and government departments increasingly have content designers, not writers or editors. And that's because this really is about designing a solution to meet a user's need. And yes, that solution will usually involve writing some words that will be published on a website. But it's not just about that, it's about interrogating that data and thinking in terms of what does this user really need to know where. Maybe I could use or develop a tool instead of just flat content, and what other bits of the site does this relate to? It's really about designing a solution, so we called it content design. And there's a whole lot of really useful information, again, published as part of the Government Digital Service Design Principles as a content style guide. So if you are interested in this, or if colleagues are and they haven't seen that yet, I'll definitely point them at that. And I can't possibly do it justice in the few minutes that I've got left up in front of you. So take a look at that if you're interested in the detail. But a couple of headlines are firstly, and hopefully some people know this, but we know that users tend to take in the information that's top left and lose interest quite fast. And that's particularly true now they're increasingly looking at your content on a smaller screen. So actually, how can you grab their attention and make really efficient use of that space and get across what needs to be, what they need to know? So the purpose of any page or tool on your site should be to meet a specific user need as efficiently as possible. So why has that person landed on your website? And what do they need to know or do? And the answer to that is very rarely that they want to browse around and just spend some time on the council website. I mean, maybe a little bit more central government, never, probably, but local government, I appreciate there may well be stuff about what the council are up to, or the mayor, or whatever, that is browsable, but we're not really talking about this here. We're talking about people who've got a need to be met online. So what is that need, and what do they need to know or do? So present things in the order that makes sense to the user, which is actually surprising. It may sound really obvious, but when we have a look in a minute at some of the sort of real examples, you may find that isn't always the case. And only include what they need to know to successfully make that decision or take that action. They don't need to know what the transport team's been doing in the last 12 months. They just need to know how to report a pothole, for example. There's lots more in this kind of stuff in that content style guide, but just a couple to mention, since we're thinking about sort of helping people who might not be so confident online. Use the active voice when you're writing, so you must or you can, rather than it is mandatory to or it is recommended that. Use the active voice and use plain English. So GovUK is written for a reading age of 9. So your average 9-year-old or an adult with learning difficulties who has a reading age of 9 should be able to understand what is written on GovUK. And it wasn't dumbed down, and we had this debate a lot. It's actually often a lot clearer and easier for everybody. In fact, it's always clearer and easier for everybody if you're writing in plain English. And have a look at WK in a quiet moment if you've got time. And do you feel patronised, or do you just feel like you can understand the information? So average reading age of 9 for WK. Came up against this a lot in my dealings with central government departments. But what about legal and what about policy? And it has to be written in this way. Very, very rarely was that actually the case. When you sit down and go, hang on a minute, let's really break it down. What is it that we need citizens to do here? Do they need the legal language, or is it just that we need this legal outcome to be achieved, or we need compliance with this policy to be achieved? Because you can get the person to be compliant and adhere to the law using plain English. In fact, you're more likely to succeed if you use plain English. So use the language used by real people, whilst taking account of the language used by government. So we can't ignore the fact that there are forms with stupid names or complicated procedures. We don't ignore those, but you just make sure you leave English. So this is an example, very briefly, of Google Trends, which I mentioned earlier, which helped us to find out that holiday entitlement is actually what people search for, not annual leave. So in this case, you probably can't see that at all, but it's car tax versus vehicle tax versus tax dis. Always a hot potato. Road tax is the really hot potato bit, if you ride a bike. But this is about, what are real people searching for? And the answer is the blue line bottom is car tax. So, but they are also, some of them are using tax dis, because that's the thing they actually want to buy. Not many are using vehicle tax. The page on WK is called car tax, because that's what the majority of people are actually looking for. But we get straight in there with get a tax disc, because that's actually the action that people are trying to take. They want to buy a tax disc. And then we do mention vehicle license in the first line of the small text, so that Google can pick up the fact that it is about vehicles and it is about licensing. So that's an example. And then at the bottom, there are two. It does say you need to have your reminder letter and then brackets at V11 or V85/1. So we've called it a reminder letter because that's what it is in plain English. Now it happens to be the V11 or V85/1, so we need to put that there because people might look and see if it's the right document. But it's, at the end of the day, it's a reminder letter. So you don't have to hit people with the internal terminology first. You can use plain English and then back it up with the terminology. Oh yeah, there are my little boxes, so I don't have to point. Thank you. So the final thing then, I think, is the penultimate thing around user journeys. So this, everything I've just talked about here is about there's this user with a specific need, and how can we design a piece of content tool that really meets that need. But sometimes people are on a journey from one place to another. Actually knowing where your users starting from and what's the immediate need you're going to meet then and there on the first page they see, but what might be the next steps that they need to take or the previous things they need to have done is important. In terms of that first question, the answer is very often Google. So journeys tend to start on Google, increasingly so. And that means that any page on your website is a landing page, because people will come straight into it from Google. So we used to say at WK that Google is our main page, because actually that's where most people come from. So that's something to bear in mind, which is partly why WK pages always have this very clear title, and it's very immediate to who the page is for as soon as you get there. And this before you start box was something we introduced, which particularly with government transactions is really useful because it tells you actually you do need to have a national insurance number, or you're going to need your address as it appears on your council tax bill. It gives everyone a chance to go and rummage around in the filing cabinet before they start the transaction, which otherwise is frustrating, as we all know, if you get halfway through and don't have that and then it times out and you're in a rage. And then also, if you're keeping your content really focused and simple, so that it's just about the job in hand, that's great, but you need to give people access to other related content on the right. So actually, if someone's come here, but they don't yet really know what self-assessment is, or they need to know when the deadline is, you need to give them links to that stuff, but you don't need to fill this page with loads of information about the deadlines, because that's not what they've asked for. They've asked to log in. And finally, we'll hopefully be glad to hear, this is the last you're going to hear from me, accessibility. So I think on a day that's dedicated to sort of helping the digitally excluded to become included, it's particularly important to think about this. But accessibility, I think, is many things. It's about using plain English, like I just talked about, and that average reading age, making sure you're writing so that people can actually understand whatever their reading ability or language skills are. also about acknowledging that increasingly your content is going to be accessed on a small screen. Now, GDS, we were lucky with building things from scratch. We could build WK and indeed all the transactions now using responsive design. So there is just one version of WK and it sizes appropriately to fit the browser and the screen that you're using. Now, if you've got some older technology and you're stuck with an old site for CMS for now, that might not be possible, but there probably are still other things you can do to optimize for mobile. And building an app almost certainly isn't one of them, but making sure that your content can be accessed on mobile, ideally by responsive design. And then finally, yes, there are then those other activities which are formally known as accessibility. So around making sure that your content, so the things you're building adhere to common accessibility standards and can be accessed by people with screen readers or with physical impairments using various kind of technologies. So this is a guide that describes all of that on the Government Digital Service Design Manual, which I referred to earlier, which does list the screen readers which government services should support and those sorts of things. So that's a whole specialism, but there is a lot of information out there available on it. So I think that's it really for me. It's about, in terms of sort of making sure your services are so good that those that can and have the skills choose to use them, is about really focusing in on user needs. Who are the people using this and what do they actually need to do and how can I make that as easy as possible? Based on evidence and data, which will help you win battles internally, definitely. And design specific simple content to meet those needs. Signpost like your next steps, don't chuck it all in together. And make sure everyone can access it. And that should get you closer to our first objective, which is to make digital services so good that people choose to use them.
Have you any questions at this point for Sarah?
I'm around all day as well. Yeah, fine.